Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. This week, we're going to start as just me, but we will be joined by Digital Trends Giovanni Colantonio for a lengthy main segment. But first, I'm going to kick things off solo by talking a bit about the news, as well as my recent trip to the brand new Nintendo store in San Francisco. Apologies if I'm a little out of sorts right now. I just got home after a lengthy travel day that involved my Uber driver being pulled over by the cops. And then on the flight, remnants of a tornado warning in Minneapolis resulted in my plane circling over the airport for about 30 minutes before taking its final approach. So a long day, but it's all good. I made it home, and I'm able to get this episode to you all with time to spare. So, as I mentioned during last week's pre-recorded episode, I would get to any news that I missed last week during this week's show. So that is exactly where we were going to start off. There wasn't actually a whole lot of stuff to talk about, so I had a whole nother thing that I was going to bring up during this segment. But then, Nintendo just decided to release some stuff, some news and all that stuff. So we're going to chat a little bit about that. But first, one of the news stories that hit prior to this evening, NBC Universal, the studio behind the Super Mario Brothers movie, they may have leaked the name of the Super Mario Brothers movie sequel. I'm going to be talking some spoilers here for the first Mario movie since it plays into this potential name that came out of this. So just be warned there. But at the end of that movie, the credits scene, we see a Yoshi egg. It appeared to be in the sewers where Mario and Luigi first went to the Mushroom Kingdom in the movie. So I guess we probably should have seen this coming if this name ends up being the actual name. But according to a now taken down text blurb on NBC Universal's website, the next Mario movie could be called Super Mario World. So this would obviously line up with the story of Super Mario World, given that it's where Yoshi and Mario first met. But there was also some doubt, if you looked at the blurb, that this could have been them referring to what they are officially calling the kind of Mario Cinematic Universe instead of the individual movie. So yeah, like I said, it was taken down. And now if you look at that blurb, it no longer references that at all. But whether it ends up being called that or not, the movie is set to arrive in theaters less than a year from now. That's really sneaking up on us, isn't it? April 3rd, 2026 is the current theatrical release date for what could potentially be called Super Mario World. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm assuming since it was in that blurb originally, that Nintendo is kind of gearing up for an announcement sometime in the near future. Maybe shortly after the Switch 2 launch. Maybe it's something that they're going to announce this month before the Switch 2 launches. We'll have to wait and see. But next up, this is the thing that I was most excited for. So we already knew that games like Super Mario Party Jamboree, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom were getting paid upgrades for the Switch 2. But in case you missed it, because I certainly did for a while there, I eventually found this list. But Nintendo announced back in April that several other games will also be getting free upgrades. And that list has, in fact, been out there for a while. But today, Nintendo updated what those upgrades for each of these free game upgrades will be, the free Nintendo Switch 2 versions. So we'll go in alphabetical order because that's how they did it on their website. ARMS, first and foremost, improved resolution, improved frame rate, and HDR support. So for people who are unaware about HDR, high dynamic range basically means the whites are brighter, the blacks are darker, and the colors just pop that much more. That's one of the big improvements that the Switch 2 brings over the Switch 1 is HDR support, particularly in handheld mode. So to have all these games start supporting HDR is really exciting. Then you go over to Big Brain Academy, Brain versus Brain, and they are adding Game Share support. So for those who are unaware, Game Share allows you to play multiplayer games with just one copy and multiple switches. So this allows for up to 4 players to share the game in party mode and the ability to share locally or online via game chat. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, which I think is one of the most underrated games on the entire Switch, in the entire Switch library, adding improved resolution, HDR support, and it's also adding game share for 2 people on all courses in the game, and you can share it locally via game chat. Um, Clubhouse Games adding game share support for up to 4 players for 34 of the 51 games, and you can share it locally or online via game chat. Game Builder Garage, which, if you're unaware about what that is, it's kind of like a more intricate Mario Maker almost, but it's not really Mario themed. It's like you can make your own game using different components that are a little bit tutorialized more so than like just straight up coding. It's like a game creation engine that is adding improved resolution. And then you can also create using the Joy-Con 2 mouse controls, which is super awesome. I'm hoping that they do a Mario Maker 2 upgrade for this at some point. They have not announced that yet, unfortunately. But that's all I want with Mario Maker 2 is Joy-Con 2 mouse controls. Next up is New Super Mario Brothers U Deluxe, just adding improved resolution there. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I think this is the big one. Improved resolution and improved frame rate. Thank you. We've been wanting improved frame rate forever in that game. I'm hoping, I mean, if Switch 2 cannot make that game run well, then I think it's just a lost cause, and I'll be even more down on that game. I maintain that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, underneath all the technical problems, it is one of the better Pokemon games. But if the Switch 2 version doesn't at least get us a stable 30 frames per second, then I will lose a lot of faith in the studio to make a game that can run well, because that game was so poorly optimized on Switch 1, but Switch 2 had so much power, and if they're actually making a point to call out that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are getting these upgrades, then it has to work. If it doesn't, it's just it's a lost cause. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, improved resolution, improved frame rate, and then Bowser's Fury specifically is getting HDR support. And they are also adding game share support for up to 4 people in Super Mario 3D World, 2 people in Bowser's Fury, where one person will control Mario, the other person will control Bowser Jr., and you can share it locally or online via game chat. Super Mario Odyssey, improved resolution and HDR support. Game share where 2 people can play together with one person controlling Cappy, and then, of course, sharing via game chat. And then 2 Zelda games. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom getting improved resolution and HDR support, and Zelda Link's Awakening, improved resolution and HDR support. I'm actually kind of surprised that Link's Awakening is not mentioning improved frame rate, because I think that was one of the problems that people had, and that was one of the things that people were really hoping for when they said that Link's Awakening was getting this Switch 2 upgrade. So maybe that'll also be a side effect of just having a more powerful system. Maybe, hopefully, it'll just like run a little bit better, because that was really the biggest detractor from that game, if I recall correctly. So all of these upgrades are going to be available on Switch 2 free of charge on launch day, which is June 5th. So if you already own those games, they should automatically get all of those upgrades I just ran through. So something to look forward to, even if you can't get your hands on something like Mario Kart World or whatever, or you're only buying one game, your existing games, several of them, will absolutely run better as long as, these promises go into effect. Smaller news story here. We do have a new game added to the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack N64 library. It's one of the better fighting games on the Nintendo 64. Killer Instinct Gold is now available in the N64 catalog. So if you're unfamiliar with that, the game was developed by Rare. So it's the same studio that brought us like all these incredible games like Donkey Kong Country, Banjo-Kazooie, Diddy Kong Racing. And it has 10 fighters and several modes, including arcade, team mode, tournament mode, and training mode. And that's available right now on the Switch N64 catalog. So kind of transitioning out of the Nintendo specific news, a couple of weeks ago, I went on a long rant about kind of the state of games media and supporting the outlets and creators whose content you enjoy consuming. And it was all framed around Polygon and Giant Bomb's implosion on the same day. Well, it turns out there's actually some good news out of that same situation. Last weekend, during a PAX East panel, which I think a lot of people assumed was going to be the final time that they were going to see that crew of Giant Bomb together, Jeff Grubb, Jeff Bakalar, and Dan Reichert announced that they have pulled off kind of the ultimate heist. They worked out a deal with Fandom to acquire Giant Bomb. And that means it is no longer owned by Fandom and will now operate as an employee-owned website and channel and all that stuff. So really great news out of there. First of all, I cannot express my happiness for my friends over at Giant Bomb enough. They do such incredible work. They're such a bright spot in this industry. They have a blast doing what they do, and they do it well. And it's inspiring to see another really positive story come out of something that seemed so demoralizing. Obviously I was very much impacted by the closure of Game Informer back in August of last year. And I think a lot of people were really upset about that as well. So when it came back and, we saw that, it was going to be operating underneath a different parent company, a lot of people kept coming up to me at like the Nintendo Switch 2 event and the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater event that I'm going to be talking about with Geo and the main segment. Just basically being like, hey, like it's weird that there's like good news. Like 2025 has not brought a lot of good news without like a catch. And I understand that. Like it's been a rough year in a lot of ways, but it's been really fantastic because Game Informer coming back has been like pretty much an unmitigated success story. Like there hasn't been any monkey paw situation where, yeah, there's good news, but it has this really bad catch. It's been fantastic. And it seems from, talking to people, from seeing people on social media, from hearing the panel, it seems like this is another one of those situations where it seemed like the most dire of terrible situations for this group of people, many of whom I call close friends, and they pulled it off. They were able to acquire the name. They were able to bring back the people who made it great. And it's really awesome that people kept saying like, oh, well, Game Informer coming back, that's such a once in a lifetime thing that never happens. And on one hand, I'm really excited that it is something that we were able to pull off and something rare that against all odds, we were able to make it happen. But I'm even happier that it's not a once in a lifetime thing. I'm even happier that, Giant Bomb was able to escape underneath a parent company that was kind of doing them wrong by all indications. So I'm really excited that they were able to kind of join that club and getting out from under a company that either wanted to shut them down or kind of cut them out from underneath their legs. So that's really awesome. And the other part that I want to bring up is this all means that if you are a fan of Giant Bomb or you've ever consumed their content, your support of them is more important than ever now. Financially, if you can swing it, but as we talked about last time, that we talked about this particular situation, moral support, just visiting their website, engaging with their content. If you search something and it gives you like Google gives you like kind of the AI rundown at the top, scroll past that and actually visit the site, because that's the type of stuff that will continue to make sure that places like Game Informer and places like Giant Bomb can continue operating. And I'm sure they're extremely excited, and I know like they know how to create killer content centered around just an amazing community that they've built. But there's no way this isn't also extremely stressful as well. A couple of weeks when all this stuff with Giant Bomb went down, I texted Dan, and he was like, hey, we have a plan and we're going to bet on ourselves. And now in hindsight, that response makes so much sense. I just really hope that everybody who has enjoyed Giant Bomb over the years will find a way to make sure that them betting on themselves, that that bet pays off, because it is a very stressful thing to kind of go off on your own, even though like it's also incredible news. So yeah, just support them in any way that you can, and help them make this a success story, because for a long time, the only way that a games outlet could really be viable was through the support of a corporation or a parent company. And we're seeing now more and more that the corporations are not really in it for the long haul, or in it for the right reasons. So that when it comes time to tighten the belt, it seems like the media companies, whether it be Fanbyte or what we saw with Giant Bomb or what we recently saw with Polygon, it seems like those are the first things to go. So they aren't really in it for the intrinsic value of media. They're in it for like trying to cash in any way that they can. So when now that we have this kind of like change in the tide, where it's no longer so much about these giant parent companies, and it's not so much about these corporations keeping these outlets afloat, it's now taking a shift more towards smaller companies, non-corporate entities, and employee owned stuff in particular. Like that's the stuff that is, we're seeing more of that, and that's really exciting, but it's also really stressful because like they need your support a lot. So just a plea for any kind of support for going their way. I know it'll mean a lot to them. And just like I did last time, I promise I'm not trying to turn that rant into a self-serving rant, but I do want to mention that this show is brought to you by the wonderful folks over on the All Things Nintendo Patreon page, and without their support, I literally could not continue doing this show. If you want to come join, you can come in as low as $3 a month. That gets you access to the community Discord. Folks are over there chopping it up about Switch 2 pre-orders. We're still trying to get me a Switch 2 pre-order. The recently announced Switch 2 upgrades I just talked about earlier in this show, and several other topics, including Gears of War coming multi-platform. There's also $5 and $10 tiers to get you perks like early and ad-free episodes and shout outs at the end of every show. All the tiers get you priority access to Q&A episodes. So head on over to Patreon and search for All Things Nintendo, or type in patreon.com/Brian Shea podcasts. And I've also, during this little segment talking about how to support this podcast, I've always mentioned my merch store over on TeePublic. Well, I guess they did something, because they have been blowing my inbox up, trying to get me to convert urgently to their new partner site called Dashery. So I did just that. You can now find all things Nintendo merchandise over on Dashery. Just search for All Things Nintendo and it should bring up the page. All right, so a couple of topics I want to get into. The first one, I don't want to talk too much about this because I already spent time on it in a previous episode, but I have been playing Capcom Fighting Collection 2. That is out right now. I mentioned last time that I had played the PS5 version, and there were a couple of games I couldn't talk about, those being Capcom Fighting Evolution and Power Stone 1. I can now talk about all of those. And on top of that, I have put in an hour or two on the Switch version. And I know that's important to a lot of people listening to this podcast. So I wanted to just, reassure everybody that all the games that I played in Capcom Fighting Collection 2 on Switch ran super well. It's not a performance drop whatsoever. I like the controller on the PS5 and the Xbox Series X better for fighting games than I do the Switch controller, especially the Joy-Cons. But I played some Street Fighter Alpha 3, I played some Power Stone 1, I played some Capcom Fighting Evolution, and I played Plasma Sword Nightmare of Bilstein, which are 4 of the games that are in this collection, and all of them ran extremely well. Again, I wish the Joy-Con was a little bit better for a fighting game, but I can't really complain. It's an incredible package. All the games are super fun. It's a gold mine. It's a treasure trove of great games that are now available in one package. Street Fighter Alpha 3 is one of my favorite Street Fighter games of all time, But on top of that, I'm so freaking excited that Power Stone is back. Capcom's like not only acknowledging its existence, but it's bringing it back through this collection. So happy these games, which I spent so much time playing on the Dreamcast, are now available somewhere other than the Dreamcast. And then there was also a PSP collection. Those are going to be the highlights for me. But Project Justice is cool. Like, you know, it's in the Rival Schools series. I wish Rival Schools was in this, but you know, Project Justice is pretty cool. I after on my flight tonight, I was playing Plasma Sword Nightmare of Bilstein. I have a new appreciation for that game. I think that was one of the games that I talked kind of, you know, lukewarmly about on the last time that I talked about this collection. I thoroughly enjoyed playing through arcade mode in that game now. Like I had so much fun. It's a very fun 3D fighter. Also, I love that you can map like the specials or ultimates onto like the left trigger. That makes it really enjoyable to be able to just kind of like pull off those abilities without having to learn all the inputs in, you know, across all these various games. So yeah, that really helped my enjoyment with some of these games that I want to play and I want to be good at, but I don't want to have to put in a ton of time. Like if I do ultimately end up becoming like a giant Plasma Sword Nightmare of Bilstein fan, then I will learn the inputs. But just jumping in and kind of playing casually and seeing like what this game that I'd never heard of before this collection is all about, you know, that special shortcut was really awesome. I really appreciated that. I love that you can do arcade mode, training mode, versus mode for them. um and yeah, it's a really fantastic collection of games. You can also toggle all kinds of settings. Like you can change the difficulty on every single game. You can make it so that, like, you know, the secret characters are unlocked by default. That's really fantastic. So yeah, it's available on Switch and every other major platform as of today. And to close out this first segment before I'm joined by Gio, I want to talk a little bit about my trip that I took this past week. And I was invited by Nintendo to get a couple of days head start on the brand new Nintendo store in San Francisco, California. So it is the second publicly available US store. So there's 5 public Nintendo stores in the world. There are and first party Nintendo stores. There's some third party operated stores in other parts of Asia, but in the US there's the New York store. There is the San Francisco store now. There's also the Redmond, Washington store, but that you have to be escorted by an employee. I've been able to go in there a couple of times. It's a completely different vibe from these. Um, but as far as the public is concerned, it's the New York and the San Francisco stores. And then over in Japan, there's one in Tokyo that I've been to multiple times. There's one in Osaka that I've been to once, and then there's one in Kyoto, which I've not yet been to. The one in New York is the first one, and then following those, they opened the additional ones in Japan, and the San Francisco one is the most recent one. And I will say, having gone to the New York one probably 10 or 15 times now, I usually make a habit of that whenever I go to New York. I mean, that's where I met Reggie for the first time, was at the Wii U launch at Nintendo New York. I was covering it. Uh, I will say this: the San Francisco one is much nicer. It feels much newer. Obviously, it is, and it also it feels more in line with the Japanese ones. Like the in the New York one, like there's a cool museum where like they used to have like the Game Boy that was like salvaged from the Gulf War. They have all the old consoles and everything. Those aren't in these other stores. That's something that's unique to the New York store. And there's also some statues that are only in the New York store. Like there's one of Bowser bursting out of the wall. There's one of Mario on a flagpole. Those are not here, but there are other statues that are in the San Francisco location, and some of those are also in the New York ones. So you can go in and see those statues, but like, you know, there's a lot of exclusive merchandise. A lot of it was previously only available in Japan, though they did start bringing some of it over to New York. But yeah, it feels like a much more prestige style store than the New York store, I feel. So looking at like the flow of the store, when you first walk in, you enter on Powell Street. When you first walk in, on the right, you have kind of like exclusive merchandise with like character designs and everything that you can only get at this store. And then on your left is themed areas. So there's Mario. There's like the Mario section, which is signaled by the giant Mario statue. Lots of great stuff there. You keep going back along that wall, and then you get to the Animal Crossing section. Oh, and by the way, the Mario section also has a Mario Kart area. So there was a hat that I almost got that was like, it just says Mario Kart across it. And I was like, that's kind of cool. But I do not need any more hats. So I did not pick it up. Go back, and then there's the Animal Crossing section, and they walked us through this. They had a tour guide who is like a product expert, and he was talking about how the Animal Crossing section was more about taking the things that you really associate with Animal Crossing and bringing it into our world. So there's a lot of like home items, like there's like the Roost, the coffee shop within Animal Crossing. There's like coffee stuff, like you can get like coffee mugs and a coffee grinder and like different like dishes and everything. There was also Mario dishes, but a lot of like home stuff that you can get that's like Animal Crossing branded or like has characters on it. There's also a lot of apparel for all these things. Also on the right side behind the exclusive Nintendo San Francisco stuff is a Donkey Kong section, which has a ton of stuff. And then in the back right corner of the top floor, there is an area where there's like some like harder to find items. Like there's like the Nintendo Switch Online controllers that you can only get online unless you go to a Nintendo store. You can get an Alarmo if you feel so inclined. And there's also a section where you can customize your own Nintendo Switch. So there's like little tablets, and you can scroll through and customize the Joy-Cons, the straps, the little like caps that you put on the Joy-Cons that have the straps attached. And you can also customize your dock. So like you can do like black or white, but there's a ton of colors you can choose from on the Joy-Cons and everything. And then there's some games that you can buy, like they have them laid out pretty cool. And then you go downstairs, and that's where you find the Zelda, Splatoon, Kirby, Metroid, and Pokemon sections. So these are all still like very much themed after like what their target audience is. So Splatoon kind of has like a punk rock vibe. Like there's clothes that you can buy that are actually like in-game clothes. Lots of plushies. And there's an Inkling statue. And then the Zelda section was my favorite. Obviously, I mean, I'm a giant Zelda fan. If you listen to this podcast, you know that very well. But there's a big Link statue. They have all kinds of really great stuff. They were saying that like, since Zelda's like an E10 plus franchise, they kind of took that as like the liberty to have more kind of mature themed items for sale in the Zelda section. So like you'll still find things like plushies and t-shirts, and like there's like a fairy collection. But it's also like, there's wine glasses, and there's like really like nice leather bound notebooks with like the Triforce on it, and kind of darker designs, and there's a Master Sword replica that's kind of cool. Just like a lot of really cool stuff, a messenger bag, really nice jackets. So yeah, they were really kind of playing into like, this is kind of like a game or a franchise that maybe is for an older crowd, but there's still like younger fans. So they have some of that stuff as well. The Kirby and Metroid sections are pretty small. Then the back right corner of the downstairs is Pokemon, like Pokemon Palooza, basically. And none of that stuff is truly exclusive to the Nintendo stores. It is all in partnership with the Pokemon Center, which is, if you haven't been to one of those, fantastic store with lots of pretty exclusive merchandise. But you can also go to PokemonCenter.com and find a lot of that stuff as well. And I forgot there's a Pikmin section as well. And then in the back left corner, there is like kind of like a gaming area where there's a few kiosks set up. So you can play like different games, watch different trailers. And then there's also a giant amiibo wall, and that wall has a ton of stuff that you can like a ton of amiibos, very hard to find amiibos. They had the Metroid Dread 2-pack. They have the different Mii characters, the Mario Odyssey wedding amiibos. They were all there. Lots of really hard to find amiibos. And Then there's a giant screen in addition to like the little kiosks where people can play up on just a huge TV or a projector. I didn't look at which one it was, but it was one of the biggest screens you could possibly have in a store space. So I ended up getting some stuff, and I'm gonna for people who are listening to the podcast, I'm gonna do a little bit of show and tell. The video version, I heard people's feedback loud and clear. I'm going to start trying to put the video version on Spotify in addition to YouTube. So yeah, be sure to check out the video version on Spotify if you are listening on that platform. Otherwise, it's still going up on YouTube and the audio is still going out to everything else. But I'm going to do a little bit of show and tell of what I got. So some of these are gifts. So I didn't get all this stuff. I'm trying to cut down on the amount of stuff that I'm getting. But so this is a Hylian Shield plushie. I picked this up for somebody's kid. They're getting very much into Zelda. So I thought of what could I get for a 6 or 7 year old, and thought that would be quite a big hit. Speaking of gifts that I got, so one of the big things that you can get at Nintendo San Francisco that you can't really get anywhere else are these replicas of the statues that they have scattered throughout the store. And I got my friend, who's a big Zelda fan, a Link statue, a replica of the Link statue that is in Nintendo San Francisco. So those were at least the Link one was $50. And another gift was this clear bag. And if you're looking at the video version, this is an exclusive piece of art. These characters are also on the outside of the windows of the Nintendo store. And they kind of lead you to the entrance. So like there's Link, some villagers, including Isabelle, Inkling Girl, and Mario. There's a ton of others in the in the window art. But yeah, that's like the key art that they have there. Two of the things that I got for myself, this is a Master Sword desk lamp, and I like it because it looks almost like the Breath of the Wild collector's edition that I foolishly missed out on. And that also was another hitch in my travel day. That actually got I got flagged by TSA because they saw that I had a sword in my carry-on. So but once I pointed out there's no point to the sword, they were like, okay, yeah, you're good to go. But I was concerned there for a second. They had a ton of Zelda pins, so I got an Ocarina pin, Ocarina of Time pin. So that's fun. And then as you go through, there's like a stuff you can do in the store to earn stickers that you can put on these passports that they give you. So I got 2 Link stickers. This one is the Breath of the Wild one, and then this one is him in his more traditional green tunic. And then to celebrate the opening weekend, they also were handing out these exclusive Nintendo San Francisco coins. And it has Link in his green tunic. So very cool store. I'm very happy I got a chance to go. Big thanks to Nintendo for inviting me out to that event. I tried to show restraint, but I still came out with a lot of stuff. So we are going to take our first and only break of this episode, and when I return, I will be joined by Giovanni Colantonio to talk about our time together with Tony Hawk and his upcoming game. We will be right back. We are back, and as I mentioned on last week's episode, I was recently in Los Angeles playing a game that will be coming to both Switch and Switch 2. That game is actually 2 games. It's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4, and I attended THPS Fest while on the ground and did karaoke with my next guest. He is Digital Trends Senior Gaming Editor. It's Giovanni Colantonio. Gio, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Back from that trip. The jet lag has subsided. Back on the East Coast, and feeling pretty good and feeling pretty rejuvenated after what was ultimately a pretty fun preview over there.
Well, it's a very fun event. We're going to talk about the event a little bit as well, but yeah, you were in like Europe right before you came to California with us, and you're a New
Yeah.
Yorker, so like your internal clock has no idea what's going on right now.
Yeah, the week before that event, I was in Scotland for vacation, which was lovely. Had never been to Scotland before. Beautiful place, but also 5 hours ahead of where I was. Came home, was home for like 2 days, then went to LA. Was behind 3 hours, and then came back to New York. I think at this point, I'm just like living in an alternate dimension. Like I think my body is just kind of like, yeah, you just sleep when you sleep. Like we don't care. We'll get tired whenever you're tired, buddy. It's tough, but I feel alive today on a Monday. I think we're good at the time of recording.
I think the wildest stretch I ever did, I think it was at the end of 2023. I went to Mexico
Mhm.
for a family wedding. So I was down there for 10 days, came back to
Oh,
Minneapolis for, I think, 4 days, then went to Tokyo for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's cover story, a Game Informer.
ooh,
Then I came back to Minnesota for 2 days, and then I went to the Game Awards.
whew,
So
buddy,
that was
how?
so I feel your pain in terms of the jet lag. I guess that's what
That's
I'm getting at here.
that is very rough. I've never done a Japan trip, but I think if I did, and when I eventually do, because I'll do it at some point, I think that'll be the end of my sleep schedule. I think my body will be like, yeah, you just whenever, man, it's fine.
I find in, and this is going to segue into our discussion about the event. I find that when you are like extremely jet lagged, you usually have like one night that you can stay out and like be invincible, but then
Yeah.
your body just crashes after that one night.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. I mean, when I went to Scotland, the first night I got there, my girlfriend and I were kind of like, oh yeah, we're gonna like land. We had a red eye. We didn't like really sleep on it, but we were like, but we'll power through. We'll get on the ground and we'll do a day. And we just got there and we're like, nope. And the whole day was ruined. And like the next day was a little bit ruined too. It takes a bit of adjustment.
Yeah, especially when like, you go to Japan and it's like, yeah, I'm just going to be a zombie, I guess, for the
Yeah.
first day and a half. Like literally whenever I go over to Japan for like a studio visit or whatever, I always ask to like bake in 2 extra days because it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, that first day I'm going to be absolutely useless. And then that second day, it's going to be like half useless.
Yeah.
So, and I use that opportunity to explore Tokyo, but it's still like my brain is not like fully there. It's not
Yeah.
on plane yet.
The moral of the story is don't have a sleep schedule. Just don't, because then it can't be disrupted.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, we had our first night. We actually did do stuff
Yeah, we
when we
did.
were in Los Angeles, which is why I brought that up. So we got to LA, and like I think the first night we were all kind of like low key, like just kind of hanging out in
Yeah.
the hotel and everything. Then the next day we got to go and play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4, which we will be getting into in a little bit here. And for those who are unaware, it's just a modern remake of 3 and 4, as the name would indicate. But it's done by Iron Galaxy Studios, the studio behind like Killer Instinct and Dive Kick, and then they did support on Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy and Spyro Reignited. So they have quite a bit of experience with like remastering, remaking games. But before after we did like the hands-on and everything, we went to dinner with Activision PR and some other media folks. Had a pretty good dinner. It was an Italian Korean fusion,
Yep.
which was
Yep.
pretty tasty. Unexpected combinations of
Yep.
food.
A great
Uh,
waiter.
a
A
great
great
waiter
waiter.
who just I think he wanted to be the star of the show, and
And he was.
he was.
He
He
truly
immediately
was.
spilled a glass of Coke on one of the PR people, which was fun. And then he did make a big show of like, oh, I'm gonna like put every other drink down very carefully and like but like I ordered a drink and he came out and like he took the glass and like orbited it around my head for like 30 seconds before finally putting it in front of me.
Just a
Uh,
person doing bits. And you got to
just
appreciate that.
he really committed to every single bit as well. Like the people ordered the lobster like pasta, and
Yep.
it wasn't just like, hey, here's some lobster meat to pasta. It was like, hey, here's a whole lobster.
Yeah, like
and
cut in half lobster, like dissected, like the bodies exhibit at the museum.
and he
It was
brought it out.
bizarre.
For everybody who ordered it, he did the same bit where he shook the plate. Oh, it's alive.
He was, you find ways to have fun at work, right? Like I can't blame the
I
guy.
get it. Yeah.
He was having a great night. He had such a big audience, like
Yeah,
you can't fault him.
he had a captive audience that very much enjoyed the bits, and I don't think we were quite at the level of like, oh, cool. Like I used to have a dentist, and the dentist would do like sleight of hand tricks.
No, that's not what you want your dentist to do.
And the first time I went there, like I was like 10 and I was like, "Oh, that's great. That's so cool." By the time I'm like 24 and I'm going to the same dentist, he's doing the same tricks that I've seen 2 times a year since I
Yeah,
was like 10 years old.
he
I'm
like
like,
pulls your tooth, and then he's like, "What's this behind your ear?" and pulls the tooth out, and you're like, "I'm in pain. This sucks, man."
well, he like yeah, it got to a point where we're just like, "Oh, yeah, cool." The same like, "Oh, look here. Oh, it's not in my hand anymore." It's But yeah, I was not quite there with this waiter. He was good. He was a good
Yeah,
waiter. But
yeah.
then we walked downstairs and he was also the bartender. So like he
That was
had time.
the best twist of the entire thing, man. That was seeing him down there shaking drinks, and it was like, how did you even get up here to do? How are you doing two
Because
jobs?
it was
Like,
2 flights of stairs he had to
yeah,
walk up to
yeah.
get to us. It wasn't even like we were like just right on the other side of the bar.
That's why he spilled the coke, because he was like running up the stairs to get it up there, and then just tripped. The momentum, he couldn't stop.
And so yeah, we did that. Then we went back, had a beverage at the hotel bar. You, me, few other folks, and then my partner joined us. She was actually out there this weekend as well. It was just a total
Yeah,
random like overlap,
great timing.
and we were like, hey, there's like a speakeasy connected to this. There's 2 speakeasies connected to this hotel. The hotel bar was closing at 10 o'clock, so we were like, hey, let's go to this speakeasy. I hear they're doing karaoke.
Hmm,
So
hmm.
we walked through a back alley and then walked into like the underbelly of the hotel, opened up a vending machine, and there was a speakeasy, an 80s themed speakeasy, which was very cool. It
It
was an
was
awesome place.
really cool space. Yeah, yeah. And one of those spaces where it's like you have to figure out the vibe when you get in, because it's like, oh, this place is cool. And like if I'm gonna do karaoke, like am I doing the wrong song? Like I feel pressured to pick something that's cool. I agonized over it because I mean, for a while we didn't, we weren't doing karaoke. We were just like, oh, we'll sit and watch people. But in the back of my head, I was like, I want to do something. I'm worried
Same.
about killing the vibe here. But we got in, we jumped in, and I think we woke the place up. Honestly, I
I
think we were breath air there. Yeah.
uh, it's easy for you to say.
Yeah,
So
words are hard.
I was also concerned about that. So I was thinking very hard about what karaoke song I wanted to do. You were like, you jumped up first. You're like, I'm doing Flagpole Sitta by Harvey Danger, which
Yep, yep.
is a song I've always wanted to do karaoke. So like, I punched the air when you said you were going to do that because I was like, oh, that would have been the perfect opportunity because it was a very good vibe match,
Yes,
despite
yeah,
being a song from the '90s. It fit the vibes of that place.
totally.
You got up there, and I put in my name for Ballroom Blitz, and you get up there, and the DJ is very good karaoke DJ, and he plays music between the
Oh
songs.
my god,
So
yeah.
you get up there, he's playing Whitney Houston, and
And he's like, "Sing along."
he goes, "Hey, jump in, sing along," and you're like, "Oh my god, I have to sing along Whitney Houston."
I wanted to dance with somebody, and I tried for like a bar, and then was like, absolutely not in my range, and also just like completely different from the range of song I'm about to do. And if I do this, I'm gonna be totally screwed up. So I like did a line, and then I was like, nah, nah, dude, sorry. And I'm sure the guy must have like thought like, oh, this guy can't do this. This guy's not a karaoke guy. He's not cut out for this. And then I had to show him when Harvey Danger kicked on.
So yeah, you nailed that, and then I
Thank
get
you.
up and I did Ballroom Blitz, which is a song nowhere near my range, my vocal range. But I was like,
This is
hey,
a
it's a
hard
fun
one.
song.
Yeah.
So I get up there and he is playing "Living on a Prayer" for
Yep.
me, and I'm like, okay, well, he tells me to sing along too, and I'm singing that, and I'm like, I absolutely should have done "Living on a Prayer" instead of Ballroom Blitz. And yeah, did Ballroom Blitz. That was a blast. And then it was just kind of us hanging out for the rest of the
Yep.
night. My girlfriend got up, did a song.
Oh, tore the house down too.
Oh yeah, she did
Showed us
Selena,
all up. Yeah,
"Bitty Bitty
yeah.
Bum Bum" by Selena,
Oh,
and a crowd burst out dancing
oh,
alongside. I was like, great, this is a
yep.
better reaction than either of us got. But
Yeah, we got showed up. You did a great job, mind you. Just for the listeners at home, you got that high note. You nailed
I
it.
did my best. I
Yeah.
always find with that song, that's the second time I did it, and the first time it was the last day of San Diego Comic-Con, so my voice
Mhm.
was completely shot, and it
Ooh,
was one of those times where you get up and you start your karaoke performance, and immediately you realize that this is going to be a rough like 3 or 4 minutes.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I was
100%.
like, okay, well, my voice is not as shot right now on the night one of this 2 night event, so maybe I can do it. And it still was a little bit of a struggle, but yeah, yes, did
Yeah.
that. Uh, we were like, okay, well, let's call it a night. So we called it a night. Then the next day, it was just like a kind of an empty day until the evening when we got to go to THPS Fest, which
Yes.
was like this like 5 or 6 hour event at the El Rey Theater in Hollywood. And it's a legendary venue. Lots of amazing bands and artists have performed there. But they set this up like it was like almost like a premiere. They had a red carpet out front. They had like like kind of like photo ops throughout. They had a guy who was like I guess a famous like graffiti artist who was like
Yep.
you could customize like your skateboards or your t-shirts or whatever. And then they had it catered by Taco Bell, which was an interesting choice. But it wasn't just Taco Bell; it was like retro Taco Bell. So like
Yeah.
it wasn't like any of like you can get like a cheesy gordita crunch or like a crunch wrap supreme or anything like that, or like the new chicken tenders weren't there. It was just literally like soft tacos, crunchy tacos, cinnamon twists, which I don't even
Cinnamon
know if
twist.
are on the menu anymore.
Yep, yep. Some chips
And
and salsa, some chips and queso. I think you could get there too. Also, like it has to be said that the soft tacos were like the flattest, like Paper Mario thin tacos that you've ever experienced in your life. Like to the point where you like picked up and you were like, "Is there something in this?" Like it was unbelievable. I think I had one and then was like, "Ooh, this feels wrong," and I just like I didn't do it. I took on the way out. I took a bean burrito, and I was like, I'll take that to go. And I got like halfway through and was like, no, I can't. You can't eat Taco Bell in this way. This isn't right.
it didn't help that there was nowhere to put like anything. Like there
Oh
were no
yeah,
tables or anything.
no,
So because basically what it was like, hey, like all these skaters are coming here. You can go like hang out with them. Basically, you can go play the game upstairs more if you want. And
yep,
then there's going to be a concert from like 7 to 10,
yep,
and four bands played, or two bands and two rappers performed. And it was a good time,
yeah.
and it was a great venue. It was a bar in the background, all those different like activations. There was I guess Tony the Tiger was there for some reason.
He was chilling, taking photos. Yeah, he was the star of the show.
Yeah, I mean, and I spent the first part of the day or the event out on the red carpet, and I got to interview some skaters who were a part of the Tony Hawk franchise. The first one was Bob Burnquist, which was incredible because
Oh yeah,
Brazilian legend, X
totally
Games legend. And then like a few younger skaters. I got to interview Steve Caballero, which was
classic.
awesome. Like,
Yep.
and he performed later. Like, he was the first band. He's the guitarist of
He
Urethane.
was the star of the night. Like he really was the guy at that event where I was like, oh, everyone's here for Steve, really.
It really felt that way
Yeah.
sometimes. And then Tony Hawk walked through. He didn't do any interviews. I heard he wasn't feeling super great, like health wise. Like he was just a little under the weather. Like not like anything concerning, but it seemed like I saw him cough a few times. So like he's probably like just recovering from like a cold or
Yeah.
something. But he didn't really talk to anybody on the red carpet. He just came through, did a photo op, and did that. And then our pal Bam Margera walked
Yeah.
through.
Big
Uh,
surprise.
he was definitely media trained because he told the exact same story to every single person who interviewed him. And then later on, when they announced that he was coming to the game, they put out a video interview where he told that same story that he told to everybody else about how he missed like 7 flights because he was so like hooked on the original Tony Hawk game that like he had to like stop playing it because he was so addicted to it. And I'm just like, all right, I heard you tell
Yeah.
that to ESPN and ABC and the other media people in this line, but it's cool to talk to you. Like
But
he was in
if,
great
if I,
spirits.
if I was him, I would have been media trained too, because like you have to remember that like Bam was like out of the picture for so long, and I mean like he has been, right. Like he kind of got like ousted from Jackass.
Hmm.
He got ousted from like the Tony Hawk series for a little bit for reasons, and he's had some struggles, but clearly like a guy who's really working to clean himself up, and
Hmm.
he was in really high spirits at that event and like looked pretty good. So yeah, if I were him, I also would be like, I need to have this like reintroduction into society a little bit, which is what it felt like. Be really buttoned up. So like I was happy to see the guy kind of like on script and media trained. I was like, good for you, man. That's like a
Yeah.
good step forward.
And also, I followed him on Instagram after that. Like, I used to follow him a long time ago, and then like he was going through
Yeah.
some stuff, and it was kind of making me sad
Yeah.
because like he was one of my favorite like personalities growing up. Like, I loved Jackass,
Yeah, me too.
and like he was having a really rough go, and he was in such great spirits. And then like I've noticed that he was also like skateboarding a lot when he was out in LA. Like he posted a lot of videos of him like doing like video shoots and everything of him skating, and I'm like, oh, that's really great. And he was spending time
That
with his kid. So yeah, really happy that he seemed to be in like a much better place than we've seen him in the recent
it's
years.
the healing power of skating, man, and that's like the takeaway from this whole game, I think too. It's the healing power of skating. It makes you feel great instantly.
It does, even though I have not stepped foot on a skateboard for
Same, but the culture,
25 years.
the culture.
Yeah. But that was really like the thing that like hammered home with all the discussions that I had with these skaters as they were coming through, is like the Tony Hawk franchise really took, like, alongside like things like the X Games, really took
Yeah,
like skating culture into the mainstream. And like, a lot of them were like, yeah, like because of Tony Hawk, like I was able to do this like as a career and not have to like worry about having something on the side, because like all these people were playing the Tony Hawk game and then suddenly be like, I should pay attention to like this actual sport. And of course,
yeah.
ESPN was doing like their X Games stuff, which was really elevating it as well and like putting it in places of prominence. But it was kind of like a perfect storm for like skate culture in general at that time.
And it was nice hearing the musicians that played during it as well, like spoke to the influence of Tony Hawk on them as musicians too, which I thought was really interesting. Danny Brown played, and he had a thing where he had kind of said, the first time I ever heard like an Aesop Rock song was in a Tony Hawk game, and like Aesop Rock is like a huge influence on Danny Brown. And it was one of those things where you're like, man, yeah, it's not just that it introduced skating to people, but like those games and those soundtracks like introduced a whole culture to people and introduced artists to people. Like they really went beyond kind of just being like, oh, fun skateboarding sports game. I would imagine that most people that played Tony Hawk games growing up like probably didn't actually skate. Like I certainly
Mhm.
didn't, but I played those games so much. And I think speaks to the gameplay, speaks to how like tight that hook was, but also just speaks to like how cool like the culture looked from those games and how you felt a part of it. Like I think that was a big takeaway for me. In hearing some of these musicians and seeing some of these skaters, and even talking to the developers of the game, who also kind of were ingrained in skate culture in a really neat way.
Yeah, and I feel like the soundtracks, I mean, they're so legendary at this point. Like, it's like if you look at like I don't want to say the four horsemen, because I only have three games on the top of my tongue, or the tip of my tongue right now. But
Mm.
like the games that like influenced my music taste the most, it's like the Sonic Adventure games,
Yep.
Tony Hawk, that franchise, and then like this is kind of a cheat, but like the Guitar Hero and Rock Band series. Like
Yeah,
I got into
man.
so much music because of all those series.
When you got up and started doing Ballroom Blitz, I was like, "Oh, from Guitar Hero." Like that was the first time I'd ever heard that song was probably in Guitar Hero growing up, and like I still equate it to it. So yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like a lot of great games, I think, especially from the 2000s kind of era, that like we're really good about introducing people to music, and I feel like we don't get it as much anymore, which is a little bit of a bummer. Though we are kind of going to get it again with Tony Hawk 3 and 4 because of the new additions on the soundtrack and whatnot.
Mhm.
So
I
that's
will
cool.
say that I think maybe the other game on that list is a very unexpected entry. I think it was Madden 2005
Oh, sure.
that had an
Okay.
incredible like rock soundtrack.
Sure.
I want to say that I still have songs from that soundtrack like on my playlist. There was like an AFI song. There was like
Oh yeah.
an Alien Ant Farm. Like
Oh,
I think
that's
Andrew
yeah. You
WK.
if you hadn't said 2005, I would have known exactly what year it was, anyways. Like that's
Yeah.
so dated in a way that I really appreciate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get into this game. Oh, by the way, the artists who performed, it was Urethane, which is Steve Caballero's band. Adolescence, just a legendary punk rock group. Danny Brown, as you had mentioned, and then Lupe Fiasco was the headliner, and he was great.
Tore the house
I mean, they
down.
were all great. They were
Yeah.
all fantastic. And yeah, it was great to hang out with everybody. The group was like, me, you, Jesse Vitelli, Jake
Yep.
Baldino, Tim Geddes from Kind of Funny, a few other folks
Yeah,
uh,
it was a great
thrown
crew.
in there.
Me and Vitelli got in the pit during
I
during
saw that.
adolescence. The first
It,
time I ever moshed at a at a press event.
by the way, you may be featured currently moshing on the Game Informer Instagram page.
I'll,
You and
I'll
you and
take a look.
Vitelli. Yeah,
I'll
because
take a
there
look.
is a sustained shot of the circle pit that broke out during adolescence.
Yeah.
That
I mean, they played Amoeba from Tony Hawk 3, and the entire crowd came unhinged. I mean, it was cool. It was
Yeah,
a really cool moment.
it was awesome. But yeah, let's get into the game itself.
Yep.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. It's coming out July 11th. On all the platforms that it's listed for, aside from Switch 2.
Yes.
Switch 2 is the one that it's not It doesn't have a date yet. And I confirmed with PR. They said, yep, it's still summer 2025. But every other platform, so PS5, PS4, Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, PC, and Switch One come out July 11th.
Yeah.
Cross play
Between everything, right?
between
That's what
everything,
they said,
including
yeah.
sharing your park creations. Like if you want to like
Wild.
create a skate park and share it with people, it does cross play with that. So like I created on my Switch and you're playing it on Steam, you can download it, the thing that I create. That's really rad.
Yeah.
That's much needed for that community, I feel like.
Yeah.
But the game itself, I don't know about you. I don't know if we talked too much about it,
Not too
aside from the
much,
fact
no.
that we had a fun time with it. But like, it immediately brought me back to like how much I loved this series, like at the peak of its heyday, right? Because that's what Tony Hawk 1 through 4 and then probably Underground 1
Yeah.
really represents, is like this is the pinnacle of this franchise. And I've enjoyed other Tony Hawk games after that. Like I'm like I will play pretty much any of like the classic Tony Hawk games, like up through like Project 8 and be like, yeah,
Yeah.
I still have a fun time. But like 1 through Underground are like chef's kiss perfect games.
Yeah. I mean, the first 3 were the ones that, like, I played the most, but, like, 3 was really the one that was, like, the most influential on me as a kid, 'cause, I think the GameCube was really, like, the first console that I owned that, like, actually felt like mine. You know, it wasn't, like, a hand-me-down or something I was sharing with my brother. Like, it was really my first console, and, like, Tony Hawk 3 was, like, one of the first games I had for it, and, like, man, I can't tell you how many hours I put into that thing. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
loved that game so much. The music, obviously, a big thing, but also just, like, the gameplay of those are so unimpeachable to this day. You just pick up the controller, you know what to do, it feels smooth. So coming into it, you know, obviously I'm kind of like, okay, you know, this isn't the studio that did Tony Hawk 1 plus 2, crucially, right? Different studio. So
Yeah,
I'm kind of like,
Vicarious Visions was folded into Blizzard shortly after the release of 1 plus 2, which is
yes,
like the original story was like Tony Hawk was like, yeah, they had like 3 and 4 like in the hopper. They were going to start working on it. Then they got folded into Blizzard, and Activision didn't really trust anybody else to do a good job with it, so it got shelved. But clearly, they found
yeah.
somebody.
So I was really like, okay, we'll see how this goes, because I mean, even to this day, like Tony Hawk 3 is one of the highest rated reviewed games of all time,
I think
right?
it's
Like,
tied for fourth.
yeah, which is wild. Just never been unseated. Just like a game that universally at the time everyone was like, yeah, this is
Yeah.
unimpeachable. One
So
of the
I
best games
looked
of all
up
time.
the games that it's tied with, and it's
Yes.
like Red Dead Redemption 1, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I think like Mass Effect 2, I think are the games that Tony Hawk's
Wild.
Pro Skater 3 are tied with on Metacritic for like fourth greatest game of all time.
And like it is that good. Like it really that's not bluffing. Like it's a great game. Yeah, no, so I came into it really like not skeptical, because I kind of figured that the groundwork that was set with 1 plus 2 would be there, and they were kind of building off of that. So I kind of knew that it would be consistent. But you know, obviously, like that's heavy shoes to fill. I don't know if that's
Mm.
even a term, heavy shoes, but I'm going to say heavy
Big
shoes to fill.
shoes.
Those are big shoes. Well,
Heavy
big shoes
shoes are
would
if
be
like the
heavy.
mafia is about to put you in like
Yeah,
the lake.
those are real concrete shoes to fill. We'll use that term when we talk about Mafia, the old country.
Yes.
Uh, so I was not skeptical. You know, I thought that they would pull it off, but they really, from what I played, pulled it off quite well. And that's the thing that I'm happy about. Like, it doesn't feel like, oh, you can feel where Vicarious Vision stepped out and the new studio came in. Like, it is a very natural passing of the torch. Makes sense, because they actually helped on the PC port of Tony Hawk 1 plus 2. They were the studio that helped with that, so they had a little bit of experience with the series already. But yeah, they have perfectly translated that game to the kind of like modern engine or whatever that they're using. And when I talked to the design director of it, the thing that he hammered home is, you know, I asked him like, what do you think it is about this game and this series that feels so timeless for people, right? Because people still talk about this game and still love these games and whatnot. And the one thing he stressed was like the movement, like the
Mhm.
movement and the controls of these games is so good that like timeless games should feel that way. And he talked about Mario 64 and how like you can go back to that game and it feels consistent, and it feels great. And that's kind of how they see Tony Hawk as well. So you can tell they put a lot of work into like, hey, we don't want to break any of the stuff that was here before. We still want it to feel like that game felt, and we don't want to like, you know, screw with it in the way that like Tony Hawk 5 very much screwed with it, right? Like famously. It feels, I instantly picked up the controller and knew how to do everything, right? Like I knew how to manual, I knew how to do all the moves without looking at a single tutorial. They very nicely kind of layer in new stuff like wall plants, and there's a little bit of stuff they bring from Tony Hawk 4 that's very natural and doesn't feel like it messes up things at all. They've adjusted parks ever so slightly
Mhm.
to kind of like account for some of those new things. So one thing I talked to them about in the interview is they were like, the levels are like pretty much one to one, except like there's a lot of new grind lines that we've kind of like put in
Yeah.
for things like, for example, in Suburbia, in Tony Hawk 3, they added skitching is in the game now, which was something in Tony Hawk 4. You can ride behind cars. So in Suburbia, there's like an ice cream truck that now you can ride behind. And they kind of figured like, okay, that's cool, but you need an off ramp of somewhere to go from that. So they added in just like some grind rails here and there, so that when you're skitching, you can very naturally be like, oh, and now I can jump off here and work my combo. So I thought all the things that they did were very respectful for Tony Hawk 3. Just uh, understand it completely. Tony Hawk 4, very different story, and maybe we can get
Yeah.
into that. But the Tony Hawk 3 part of it is like exactly what you would want, I think, a remake of that game to be to a T.
Agreed. Yeah, it feels phenomenal. It like those levels. Like I don't know. So 1 and 2, I remember almost every single level in those games, like
Yeah,
to perfection, like to this day. 3 and 4, I played and I loved, but it's not like as burned into my brain as those first two entries were. But like, yeah, all of those levels feel fantastic. And
yeah,
like, yeah, they mentioned like, oh, like there's like a couple of new like lines that you can hit on the 3 and 4 levels. But yeah, let's get into 4, because
yes.
also I do want to point out that like, well, first of all, it wasn't, I brought up my preview where I wrote about the games that they're tied with and Metacritic. It's Breath of the Wild, Red Dead Redemption, and Mario Galaxy that
Okay,
3 is tied with.
got
But
it.
like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 is also tied with, I think it's like 50 or something like that. 50th greatest game of all
Wild.
time.
My
Here are the
God.
games it's tied with: Batman Arkham City, Metroid Prime, and Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree.
Whew. One of
Like,
those games is my favorite game of all time, as I've said
it's
on this podcast before.
basically like neither of these games are like bad games. But
No, that's
I
an
did ask them,
understatement. Yeah.
like I asked them about like, oh well, like the elephant in the room is that you changed like the structure of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. And essentially he was like, yeah, like, we wanted this to be like the ultimate like cohesive package of like how put together like these games and make them feel like you can play 1, 2, 3, and 4 and it feels like a similar experience, which I understand that. And I didn't feel like
Yeah.
it was too out of place like playing it. Like, yeah, they had to rework the objectives and everything because now you have the 2-minute timer instead of like you just go around in an open area. But I don't know, how did you feel about that?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings on it. I mean, on the positive side of it, and I think mostly I feel positive about it, but like on the positive side of it, like yeah, I mean that makes total sense, right? Like I think that's how people remember Tony Hawk games playing. I think
Mhm.
like even if you were to talk to someone about 4, who grew up playing all 4 of them, their brain might say, "Oh yeah, it's 2-minute clock and you do objectives and whatnot." So I get the instinct, and also like that's the game that they've built with these remakes, right? Is it's very much that 2-minute timer. The game is built around it. It would be a little bit weird to have a remake package that was sort of like, hey, here's Tony Hawk 3, and now here's like a totally different game that we've built,
Yeah.
and would require like a lot of very different work. Like, I mean, that's a totally different kind of game you're remaking. So I get that. I kind of almost see these Tony Hawk remake packages as like less faithful remakes and more like this is a collection of parks, and like Tony Hawk 3 and 4, forget the numbers, like we could just call this like Tony Hawk Master Collection, Volume 2 or something. And it's just a way to kind of get all these parks in this ecosystem, right? Like this meta progression ecosystem that almost feels like a live service game and modernizes what that formula is, right? It's a
Mhm.
very clear mix of like old and new, where you're like, here's the old formula and here's kind of the new way that games are made. And I really appreciate that about these projects, and I think it's good. Uh, I think it's just a little bit weird as like a preservation project. Like if you're coming to these being like, well, I want to play remakes of Tony Hawk 1 through 4, like Tony Hawk 4 is a different game, and it's essentially not a remake of Tony Hawk 4. It's basically like, what if Tony Hawk 4 was Tony Hawk 3? And I don't dislike that on paper. I'm personally someone who like the original game exists. I don't need a remake of this stuff at all. You know, like the original Tony Hawk games still play great. You could have just ported those and I would have been happy. So you know, if you do something different with a remake, I'm always a little bit like, cool. I'd rather you do something different than don't. And I've appreciated these Tony Hawk remakes for how they, you know, again, bring in this meta progression and everything that I think makes them feel new. But yeah, I think it is a little bit strange to not have what those games were built around and like what those parks were built around. You know, they are not, they weren't built to be Tony Hawk 3 parks with like 2 minute objectives. They were built to be more open and have more time. And I know one thing in the game is that you can change the timer, so you can go in and like set it up to an hour. So if you want that experience where it's a little more open and free roaming, I think that's there. But I definitely did feel a little bit when I was playing the Tony Hawk 4 parks, like I didn't quite have enough time to do like more than one or two objectives, where in the parks in 3 I could like do a bunch of things at once and chase
Mhm.
them. And that's the only place where I did feel that. So it's a little weird as a remake. I kind of wish it wasn't that, or I wish that like this whole project had been, hey, we're gonna make Tony Hawk, and it's just a pack collection that we update over time and bring the parks from all the games into.
I was gonna
Um,
ask you that
yeah.
actually. Did you at any point have the sense of like, oh man, I wish this was just like a paid expansion for 1+2, so you just have it all in one launcher?
Yeah, I hate to say it because I hate to like give game companies monetization strategies that I don't actually like, but like I really could have seen them releasing Tony Hawk 1+2 and then having like, hey, we're like Halo Master Chief Collection it, right? Where it's like, you're gonna buy this pack, and then over time we're gonna add in, you know, the ability to add Tony Hawk 3 and add Tony Hawk 4, and then add new parks, you know, because they're
Mhm.
adding some new parks to this game as well. It almost feels like halfway to a live service Tony Hawk like evolution, where it's like, yeah, let's turn all these games into a service and a collection that we keep updated over time. But I think maybe those plans got a little bit interrupted. You know, I wonder if Vicarious Visions had still worked on this game, if it would have been one launcher and it would have been one consistent game, and those plans were blown up a little bit. I think it would have been a little bit easier. I would rather have all these games in one package because they are kind of the same game 4 times in the way that they've built them. My only hope is that, like, if they continue to do remakes and if they do Underground next, that they do those games justice and keep what they are, because I think it's fine for these 4 games. But if you go past this point and you're like, oh, Tony Hawk American Wasteland, 2 minute timer, you know, like objectives and everything, I think then that's where people are going to be like, okay, no, these aren't remakes, guys. Like, what are we doing here?
Now let's get into the thing that you mentioned right there,
Yeah.
in that there we got to play Water Park, which
Yes.
is we got to play like what, like 8 different parks across the 2 games.
Yeah, something like that. It was a really big slice of them, which was
Yeah, we
nice.
spent a couple of hours with the game and then talked to the design manager, I think,
Design director, I think it
Mike
was. Maybe it
Rossi.
was manager. Yeah. Yes.
And you know, got kind of an understanding of like what their philosophy is behind the game. But Water Park was like one of the big revelations here, because that's an all new level.
Yep.
And
First one in like over 10 years. First original Tony Hawk level in over 10 years.
yeah, which is incredible. And I told this to Mike when I was interviewing him, and I was like, you know, the best compliment I can give you is this feels like a level that I just forgot existed in like old school Tony Hawk 4.
Yep.
And like
Yeah.
in my conversations, he was just like, yeah, like our directive was basically like, we want this to feel like a lost level, essentially, where it's like, you know, Activision gave us a bunch of old hard drives with like the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, like, you know, code or source code and whatever, and we found like, oh, this like old corner of the hard drive, we found like this unfinished park, and what we did is we finished it and put it up. But like, they really designed this from scratch. And
Yeah.
he told me a story about how like, and maybe he told you the same one, the same way Bam told everybody the same story over and over
Yeah.
again. But like, he was like, yeah, we had like one of our younger QA guys doing like playing it, and he came to me and was like, hey, like I went to go look up like a guide for like how to complete one of these missions, and I couldn't find anything on the internet. And he's like, yes, we did it.
We did it. Yeah. Yeah, he told me that one. Yeah, I mean, that for me is like the thing that I actually think is the takeaway from this preview. You know, because I think we expected Tony Hawk 3 and 4 is going to play the way that it does. It's going to play like 1+2. It's going to be a continuation of that project, and like as long as the base games are good and they don't mess up the parks, it's hard to mess them up. Like, it really is. The big takeaway was just, though, like, okay, remaking some of the greatest games of all time faithfully is one thing. Can you build on that? And can you prove that like there is a future for this series and that it's not just nostalgia? Because that's the tough part with Tony Hawk, right? It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, we're all excited, but we're also all like, oh, because I grew up with Tony Hawk 3, and like, are kids today going to really care about that? And like, is there still juice in the tank? Juice in the tank. That's where you
Juice
put
in the
juice.
tank.
Yeah, I'm just mixing a lot of things tonight. Um, but I found that Water Park was the best part of the entire package. I mean, like
It was
that
great.
that park is fantastic. How like densely detailed it is, how many grind points there are, how many points there are and opportunities to like combo into things, the objectives that they put in there, which are like really fun. There's one where there's like a pirate ship and you have to like find valves to drain the water around it, and you have to like grind all around this like amusement park pirate ship. There's kind of like you can go into doors that take you to the top of like rides. So you go into a door and it takes you to the top of this like huge water slide, and then you can
Yeah.
grind all the way down the water slide. And even just like very small details, you start to understand like how much this team understands how a park is made in these games. The best part about it's so small, but immediately when you load in, you're loading in on like a bunch of slides. It's like 5 slides in a row, one of those kind of like rides where like, oh, a bunch of people go down at once. And the way it's built is so smart because you jump on it and then you have a bunch of slides that you can like grind between, right? So you're like, oh, I'll jump between the first one to like the third one and over to the fourth one. But they've built it like almost knowing what you're going to do. So if you like jump off to the left, when you're going down these slides, there's like a grind rail at a perfect point, exactly where you would think to jump off, where you go off of that and you grind off it just enough to like extend your combo. And then there's a perfectly placed rail like right at the bottom on the ground where you land on that. And then you can like, exit off of that into a half pipe or into like
Yep.
a pit or something. Perfect. I mean, like it really like I hit it every time and not on purpose. It was just like naturally every time I went on that grind rail to start the level and like start a really good combo. And it was there where I was kind of like, this studio knows exactly what it's doing. And if you gave them the keys to do Tony Hawk 6, they could do it, right? Like the thing that matters in these games is the parks. Like they have the movement down, they have the feel down, the controls are down, that stuff's all set in stone. You have to make parks that are good. And like Water Park is like one of the best Tony Hawk levels I've probably played like in the series history. Like it's really that good, and I was incredibly impressed. What did you think of it? Did you feel similar about it?
Yeah, and I told this to. I also saw Iron Galaxy CEO Dave Lang at the THPS Fest, and he was asking me, "Oh, did you get a chance to play Water Park?" And basically, my takeaway from that was like, when you have a new studio coming in to try to add new content to a 25-year-old bona fide classic
Yep.
like they were, there is such a high likelihood that it is going to feel like a cheap knockoff. Like,
Yep.
could you imagine if, like, I don't know, like somebody was doing like a remake of Sonic 3 and they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, and there's an all new zone that like this other like if it's not Christian Whitehead, that zone is probably going to suck and feel so out
100%.
of place."
Yeah.
Like Christian Whitehead's the only person I would trust to like actually like create a level that would be on par with Sonic 3. And for people who aren't aware who he is, he's the guy who did Sonic Mania.
Yeah.
Which I guess kind of is like a THPS 3+4 type situation because a lot of
Yeah.
remakes on that, yeah.
In some way, yeah.
But yeah, but it doesn't feel like a knockoff. Water Park
No.
feels like it really did. Like it was like a level that they just found on an old hard drive that like Neversoft did back in like 2003 or whenever Tony Hawk 4 came out. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
they just did this and they didn't have time to finish it before release. So it's just like a lost level. But no, it's an
Yeah.
all new level and they crushed it.
They crushed it. Yeah, absolutely. And like also just figuring out like, objectives like to put in that level, like creating a good level of like parks is one thing, but like finding objectives that feel in the spirit of Tony Hawk, like again, that pirate ship one really comes to mind because like that really does feel like an old school Tony Hawk like thing that you would do in a level, right? Like,
You're
oh, there's a
going
pirate ship, you got
around
to drain it. Yeah, and then you drain it and it like opens a
like
space underneath the ship that you can skate in, and that even in like the first level that we played, like Foundry and Tony Hawk 3, we played the remake of that. There's a thing like that, right? Where you grind a certain part and it opens a back door and that takes you to a whole secret area. It still had that in it. I think there's like at least one more original level that's going to be in the final game, if I
think
remember
so.
right. Yeah, at least one. And I'm really excited to see that. And honestly, like, hey, I hope that maybe they support this thing post launch and add like one or two others, just as a like, hey, thanks, here it is. And if they're not doing that, I hope they're getting fast tracked to like do
Make
Tony
a new
Hawk
one.
6.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be ideal.
I mean, like based on Waterpark, I think that they would be an ideal studio to really carry the ball forward,
Yeah.
or push the board forward if we want to, not confuse our
Yeah, sure.
metaphors here.
Let's do
Um,
that.
but like, I also would like to see like maybe like break it into two teams, not like to get greedy, but like, have one team remake Tony Hawk Underground 1 and 2, and then the other
Yeah.
team like focus on making all new levels for like a Tony Hawk 6 or whatever you would end up calling it.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think Underground really could use. I mean, again, if you're going to continue the remake project, I'm still someone who's of the mind of like just port the games. Like I can just play them as they were. It's fine. But if you were going to continue doing remakes, like yeah, Underground 1 and 2 seems like a great idea. You have a renewed relationship with Bam, who's like
Hmm.
very integral to those games. You
Especially the
can't really
second one,
separate
right?
him. Yeah, I mean it's Bam. That game's Bam. I think he's like the main character
Isn't
in
it
it.
like you get to choose your team if you want to be on Tony Hawk's team or Bam Margera's team, if I
Yeah.
recall? It's very much Sonic Adventure 2, where you choose the light or
Yes.
the dark side.
Yeah, Bam is kind of the Shadow the Hedgehog
Yeah.
of the Tony Hawk universe in a lot of ways, I think you could say. Very, very accurately, I suppose. Yeah, who would you replace him with? Like, if you had to cut him out of the game, and you had to make like Team Tony versus someone else, like,
Oh my
who are you going
god.
to replace him with, man? Like, it's got to be Bam.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah,
Unless
he's
you
back
just
in the
bring in
fold.
Shadow. Yeah.
You just have Tony Hawk or Shadow the Hedgehog.
And you just play the whole game normally. Like, they don't change anything else about it, but every time it's a dialogue with Bam, it's just Shadow, and he's like, time to grind on the rail.
Hey, he does that in Sonic Adventure 2. Whoa.
That's a really good point. Yeah, he
That's the
doesn't even
game
need a
that was
board.
introduced in.
Yeah, he could just soap. He could get on his
Soap
soaps. He
shoes.
doesn't need a board. You kidding me? God, we need a Marvel versus Capcom, but for Tony versus Shadow.
All right. Well, that game, by the way, it looks fantastic in motion as well. We've not talked about the graphics. It looks unbelievable. Tony Hawk
Yeah,
1 and 2 looked amazing as well. So, very excited to finally play the full version that comes out July 11th. I was telling the dev team, I was like, yeah, this is like, I was excited for this before I played it. Now it's like
yeah,
one of my most anticipated games for the rest of the year, just because like
absolutely.
it reminded me how much fun it is. So much so that the flight home, I spent most of my flight back to Minnesota playing Tony Hawk 1 and 2 on my Steam Deck.
Great game. Really great package.
Fantastic.
That was on my game of the year list the year that came out. Like that made my top 10. It was like, yeah, they nailed this thing. So yeah, no, I'm similarly really excited about it. I mean, just any excuse to play Tony Hawk 3 again. It's great. I still have my GameCube copy like in the other room, so I guess I could fire that up. But I'm excited to see, especially like visually, like the Foundry level looked really showed it off well, where you were like, oh, like having these like I don't know, just better lighting like really brings this level to life in a way that's nice. So yeah, excited to play more.
And we both got to meet Tony Hawk at the event.
We did, yes. I spoke to Tony Hawk briefly. I did not tell him about. I have as I've told you, I have a running gag with Tony Hawk that I've had for like probably a decade at this point, maybe a little bit less. Where when I was on Twitter, which I'm not on anymore, I would tweet at him from time to time and ask him to Venmo me $20. I'd be like, Tony, you owe me $20. Please Venmo me. Didn't mention it to him when I met him, but instead just took a very blurry photo of
I
him so I
saw
can
that. I was
continue
hoping
that
you had a
show.
better selfie.
No, I took the blurriest possible photo. I tried to snap the photo really quick because he was so busy and he was like probably sick, and like the timer was on by accident. And I was like, oh
Oh
shoot! So
no.
like I took this horrible photo, but I think it's funnier that way because it looks like I rushed up to him and like was like, Tony, give me 20. But anyways, if you ever meet Tony Hawk, tell him to Venmo me $20, please.
If there's ever like a more embarrassing thing than like meeting a celebrity or something and being like, hey, can we get a selfie? And you're just woefully unprepared to take that
Yep.
selfie. That makes me so embarrassed, not only for myself, but literally anybody else that it happens to.
I was mortified and I just like pretended like it was normal. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah. And I had never seen the
Oh,
timer before. I've never had that enabled on my phone, so I don't know how it got on. And I was just like, oh cool. But man, that guy's media trained because you can tell when he saw it, he like froze. He was like, oh yeah, I can't move. Really, really knows how to get it done. Yeah, great guy. Also, we didn't even talk about the music in this. I'll just say real quick because you played in streamer mode, you didn't get to hear the new songs. They
yeah.
added a bunch of new music to this game. That's something to get excited about. There's some really good like new cuts in it that fit in really well. So that's the thing I'm most excited about to jam along to some of those songs in there. Really good stuff.
You were jamming. I looked over at you.
Oh
You were
yeah,
at the PC next to me when we were doing the hands-on session, and you were bobbing your head the entire
yeah,
time.
man. It's like Run the
Meanwhile,
Jewels. Yeah,
I was listening to the terrible, like royal. Ugh, now I'm the one who can't talk.
I know.
Royalty-free music. One of which sounds like a rock version of the Office theme.
Oh,
And
that's cool. That's what you want.
the other one sounds like, hey, like we just like removed all personality from a ska song.
I streamed Tony Hawk 1+2 when it came out for a charity stream, and instead of using the royalty free music in that game, I put on a video of bird sounds, just like hawk sounds, and I just played to like a soundscape of bird sounds for like an hour, and that I might maybe I would do again if I stream this one.
I mean, I don't want to call the music terrible, but like it was not Tony Hawk like
No,
licensed soundtrack. Like
it's
it,
streamer safe music. Yeah,
it is.
yeah,
It's supposed to like capture, like approximate the vibe somewhat of what you would
yeah.
get, but like it definitely is not like the original soundtrack. But
No, no.
anyway, that comes to Switch and every other major platform on July 11th, and then Switch 2 at some point in the summer.
Yeah.
Gio, we have a couple of games that we have. You've played both of them. I've played one of them. That the predecessors appeared on Switch, but these games are not coming to Switch quite yet. But I would be very surprised based on history with these franchises if they didn't at least come to Switch too. So
Yeah.
I want to close out the show just very briefly, like nothing in depth at all,
Yeah.
talking about our overall opinions on these games. I'm going to throw it to you first because we're going to talk about Doom: The Dark Ages. So
Yes.
both 2016 Doom, is that when the first like of this reboot series came out, and then both that and Doom Eternal, which came out in 2020, are on Switch. Doom: The Dark Ages seems like it's like new gen only,
Yes.
which tells me it might eventually come to Switch too. But tell me about this. I've not touched this game yet, but you have reviewed it for Digital Trends.
I have, yeah. Doom: The Dark Ages. I'll give my brief overview here. Kind of a prequel to those two games. It is kind of like a medieval Doom that is a more story-focused game. It doesn't have multiplayer at all. It's just a single-player campaign that is a little bit longer, has cutscenes and way more story and lore. Tries to tell the kind of origin of the Doomslayer. That's kind of the idea of it. And the gimmick of it is sort of like it's medieval, so you have like flails and stuff, but also you still have shotguns. It's very goofy and very shticky in a way that I think is fun as an idea. It is probably my least favorite of the three, I will say. It's good. It's still a really solid action game. The shooting feels great. That studio knows how to make like this puzzle-like action hook where it's like everything you do gives you a different resource. So it's like, hey, I need to top off my armor. I need to make sure to kill enemies in a certain way to get my armor. They expand on that by adding like a shield that you can use to parry and adding like melee weapons that you can use that'll give you certain things. So it kind of builds on what Eternal did well, but in a more grounded way. Eternal was a little more agile and platforming based. This is a little more like, pure action game where you're kind of like getting in the heat of things and blocking attacks and using melee weapons. Feels great, looks great. It really like an impressive bit of spectacle. I think my sticking point with it, and this is where I kind of like differ from I think some people who are really really into it, is that is a series that I think they have philosophically decided has to be turned up to 11 at all times. They're like, oh yeah, how do we keep pushing the series and making it bigger and bigger and bigger? And their answer to that in Doom: The Dark Ages is like, what if it's just always at the same level for 20 hours? It's just always the same
Ah,
kind of intensity. And that sounds really fun until you're doing the exact same thing for 20 hours and like a level where you are sieging a castle and it's supposed to feel huge and epic feels exactly the same as a level where you are like in corridors fighting random enemies. I felt that it's a little like dynamically flat because of that. It's still fun, and I think if you're gonna play it, like don't binge it. Like play a level here and there because like you'll get bored of it real fast. But it just peaks really early. Like there's a whole thing where there's a mech. You can like control a mech, and that feels like it should be a big climax of like, oh, now we're like in a mech, and that's crazy. It happens like 4 missions into like a 22 mission run, and you're like, okay, where do we go from here? And they're like, nowhere. We've already reached the top, and you're like, okay, are you sure? Do you want to do something else? And they're like, no. In fact, you're going to do this mission again a couple more times, and it's going to be the same. And you're like, okay, guys, that kind of seems like not the way to make a game, but that's fine. Yeah, I'm a little. I still like it. I had a really good time with it, really enjoyable, but it definitely for me is the least exciting of the three, and I just think the desire to be more story driven, like the story's nonsense. It's just nonsense. I'm sorry. Some of the Doomslayer origin stuff is fun, but a lot of it's just like the demons of this world are fighting, and it's like cool. You don't need to tell me that in a million words through a bunch of NPCs that are not characters I've never met before. They're just random humans who you're like, this guy, and I'm like, no, no, I really don't. But worth playing if you like the first two Doom games. It's consistent with it. It's really fun. Just I don't think it's quite the lightning in a bottle that Doom 2016 was for me.
They should really do a thing like where, you just do a side quest and you really learn like a deep, rich backstory about one of these demons that you're gonna slaughter
Yeah,
relentlessly, like over the course of the next couple of missions. But like, you see him like kissing his wife goodbye
yeah.
on the way to work. Like, yeah, I'll have to do Satan's bidding again.
Yeah,
And
the good old the Kako demon or whatever, like the floating head guy is just like in the grocery store pushing the cart, just like no limbs, just like bumping up against it, and it's like time to get cereal for the kids. That'd be cool. And then you rip his eye out.
no, Daddy, don't go to work. We want to play. I'll be home tonight. Just
Cut
really
hard
add
cut to the Doomslayer stomping on his head. Yeah, it'd be like The Last of Us, but for but for Doom. Last of Us Part Two. You play the first half of the game from the Doomslayer's perspective, and then the second half of the game from the Kako Demon's perspective, and he's just living his life. That's a cool idea.
Yeah, let's pitch that to Bethesda and id
Yeah,
next time.
honestly, like Marty Stratton or whatever, like whoever's still over there making those games, Hugo Martin might be like, "That's kind of funny. Yeah, we could do that."
The DLC.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good idea.
A walking
Somebody take it.
simulator until the final mission when the Doomslayer comes and rips your eyeball out.
That would be really funny, man. That'd be a great idea for a game. I want more games like that.
So you gave it a 3.5 out of 5.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
again, we
And
don't
my
know if it's
critique
coming
was
to Switch too.
you don't get to play as the Kako Demon enough. That's what I said in the review. I docked a point for that. That's what I
So
want.
we don't know if it comes to Switch or Switch 2, but it's currently out as you're listening to this on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X/S, and PC.
Yeah.
So if for whatever reason they decide not to bring it to Switch or Switch 2, I would
Don't
imagine it's
blame
a,
me.
a technical thing at this point. I think that my
Switch one, no
prediction
chance. Yeah. Yeah.
my prediction is we're going to get to like the Summer Game Fest timeframe. We're going to get to that Xbox showcase, and or maybe the Nintendo Direct that happens at the end of June or early
Right.
July, and they're going to be like, "Guess what's coming to Switch 2?" And it's going to be like Doom: The Dark Ages, maybe like Sea of Thieves, and a few other games.
Yeah.
Halo Master Chief Collection.
Yeah, because we haven't seen Bethesda support yet on Switch 2 or like Xbox support. I don't really think was
No,
announced. I can't
not on
remember.
Switch 2.
Yeah, and I think that's coming. But I think that like again, there was the whole thing where like we don't know who got dev kits and when they got dev kits, and there was rumor that like dev kits went out really late for this. So I imagine there is going to be some Xbox partnership coming, and I think Doom Eternal will be on that list because the ports that they did for Switch, I thought were impossible. I was like, there's no way you can get these games to run, and they were actually pretty good ports. So I think that studio that does those ports can pull it off.
For sure.
Yeah.
So that is Doom: The Dark Ages, again out now on every other platform, but not
Yep.
coming to Switch or Switch 2 quite yet. But if history would indicate anything, it's that it will come to Switch 2 at least.
Yeah.
But we'll just have to wait for an announcement. Similar to that is a game that the first game in the series came to Switch, and this game did not. This is Revenge of the Savage Planet.
Yes.
And this is out now on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. And if you played Journey to the Savage Planet, it was a first-person kind of open world, like exploration game where you went around, kind of like Metroid-y style progression, where it'd be like, oh, what's that like weird flower up there? I can't get to that
Yeah.
ledge, but there's a weird flower on the ledge. And then like 3 hours later, you would unlock like a grapple beam that would allow you to attach to those flowers and get up to there. I enjoyed that game quite a bit. I think I gave it an 8 out of 10 when I reviewed it back in 2020, I think is when the first one came out.
Yeah. 2019, I think it was.
The director of both these games is Alex Hutchinson, who I think is most well known for being the director of Assassin's Creed 3 and maybe one of the like really good Far Cry games.
Yeah.
So he worked at Ubisoft for a while. I think it was Far Cry 4 that he was the director of as well.
Okay. I didn't
So
actually know that. That's wild.
a lot of that DNA is found in this game, but it's much more of like an open world checklist game kind of deal with like Metroidvania style exploration.
Yeah.
And it switches to third person, which I think is very much to its benefit. Like with some of these platforming sequences, like the third person element really helps it. I fell to my death so many times in that first game because like first person platforming is hard to pull off.
For sure.
They solved that problem and then some with this game.
Yeah. Yeah, I really I enjoyed it. I think like it's not like doing anything particularly new, right? Like the open world exploration stuff is kind of baseline what you'd expect, right? It's like, oh, you know, there are health power ups that you can go and get, and there's abilities that you get you higher places, whatever. You know, pretty boilerplate stuff. It does have co-op, which I think is a really fun inclusion on that.
Hmm.
That's like a cool way to break up that game. You know, combat's whatever. It's just basic shooting. The thing I really like about it, though, is knowing the backstory of the studio and knowing exactly where that is
Oh yeah.
represented in the story. So for folks that don't know, this comes from a studio that is Raccoon Logic, is the name of the studio. They didn't used to be named Raccoon Logic. They used to be called, I think, Typhoon or
Yeah.
something like that.
It
Typhoon
was Typhoon.
Studios. And they released Journey to the Savage Planet like 2019, I think it was, or around there, and then got bought by Google to be a first party Google Stadia studio. They came to the platform, they made like an enhanced edition, I think, of Journey to the Savage Planet that came out on Stadia. And then they were like, okay, we're going to start our next game. And Google was like, great. And then a year later, they were like, just kidding. Stadia's dead and you're all fired. And they cut the studio, got rid of them all. But owned the IP. Like Google still owned the Savage Planet IP. And basically the studio had to go to them and be like, hey, we're reforming. Can we have our IP back? Like you're not doing anything with it and you don't have gaming anymore. Can we just have it? And miraculously, Google let it go. They were like, yeah, sure, okay, fine, you can have it. I'm sure it was more complicated than that, but whatever. This game is very much, once you know that story, very transparently and obviously about that. It is about like you are a worker who has been acquired by a company like your company, and you've been bought by this company, put into stasis for like this, you know, terraforming project that you're going to do for them. And by the time you wake up out of stasis, you have all been laid off and the company has been like dismantled very
So you're
quickly.
just stranded out in this like far reach of the galaxy.
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's a very funny concept, and it's so clearly like them being like, "We hate Google, like Google, what a bunch of jerks for what they did to us." And for me, that's like the fun part of the game, like seeing the way that they're working through like corporate mismanagement, and I think that's a very close to home thing, probably for us, you know, in the industry that we're in, we see this all the time. Probably very close to home for you, I would imagine.
Oh, I wouldn't know
This
anything about that.
Yeah, no, nothing, nothing at all. Um, and yeah, like I think like that the comedy that comes from it and the humor of like let's lampoon corporations and companies getting passed around and people being laid off and left to like fend for themselves. That's a really fun twist on the genre that I think makes it very fun. So again, not something that I'm like, oh yeah, you know, this is like incredible. I love this game, but just like a really fun little bit of like slapstick comedy that I think is of the time in a way that's really fun.
Yeah, and on top of that, like, and I will say, like, the humor, there were some times where I was just like, this is really not funny, like,
Yes.
aggressively not funny.
Yes.
But then there were other times where, like, I burst out laughing because,
Yeah.
like, there are some, like, just small little lines that, like, I don't know if they're meant to hit as hard as they do, but they really slap. So, like, that I really appreciated the humor and the attempted humor in some areas. But, like, there are multiple planets in this one.
Yep.
You're going around to different biomes. A lot of fun mysteries to uncover. I really want to hammer home the idea that like this is just like a checklist open world game, and if that is your jam, this is going to be a game that you like go crazy for.
Yep.
I had a great time with it. I think what did I give it? I just reviewed it last week. I already forgot. 8.5. You gave
Oh,
it
nice.
a 3.5 out of 5. I gave it an 8.5. By the way,
Yep.
Alex Hutchinson, pretty good. Resume here. He's the creative director of Revenge and Journey to the Savage Planet,
Mhm.
and the studio head. He's the creative director of Far Cry 4, creative
Crazy.
director of Assassin's Creed 3,
Okay.
creative director of Army of Two: The 40th Day,
Huh.
and the lead designer of The Sims 2.
That's wild. That's deeply, deeply wild. So the longer I'm in this industry, and the more I talk to people who are like, "Oh, I founded a new studio," and you're like, "Oh, okay, debut game. You know what? What's your background?" And they're like, "Oh, I invented Blizzard." You know, and you're like, "Oh, okay, cool. Okay, cool." And they're
Yeah.
like so humble about it every time. You know, where they're like, "Yeah, I did this back in the day," and you're like, "Man, this industry's weird. It's so weird."
It is. Like I was at the Game Awards this past December. I saw you there. I saw many
Yep.
other people, but I was just sitting in the hotel lobby and like this group just like, "Hey, like do you mind if we sit here with you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And they started like talking to me. And this guy was just like, "Oh yeah, like I was at Rocksteady and I worked on like all the Batman Arkham games." And I'm like, "We've been talking for like 45 minutes." And it is wild like this
Yeah.
industry and like how like you never know who you're talking to.
Yeah,
when
it's
you
it's
go to
just a
like these
job,
events.
I'm sure, to a lot of these people, right? It's just like, yeah, I worked on the Batman games. That was my day job, you know? Like I and to us, it's like these are foundational games that changed our lives. And they're like, yeah, it was a 9 to 5, you know, or I guess like a 9 to 9, I guess
Oh
9
boy,
a.m. to 9 a.m. in the case of a lot of games, unfortunately.
Jesus.
But yeah.
But yeah, go if you. I mean, hopefully both of these games that we talked about on the tail end of the show are coming to Switch or Switch 2 in the future. But if they don't, like, they are great reasons to pick up your other consoles or go on your PC and play either of these titles. But Gio, thanks so much for joining me for this episode.
Always happy to join you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much to everyone for listening. As you know, the Patreon and its associated Discord server are the best ways to get any questions or comments in. You can also get in touch with me at Brian at allthingsnintendo.com or hit me up on Blue Sky or Instagram at Brian P. Shea. That's also the YouTube channel name. And if you would subscribe to my channel, it would help me out a lot. Gio, where can people find you online?
Sure, you can find me on Blue Sky mostly these days at Mario Prime, and you can find my writing about video games at digitaltrends.com.
That is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We will see you next time. Hey everyone, before we wrap up this episode of All Things Nintendo, I just want to give a special shout out to the $10 patrons of the show. Alex Stadnick, Andy Junkins, Ben Richland, Chaps My Ass, Derek Sigmund, Dusty Beeman, Ian T. Clark, Jackal, Jason Thompson, Jawar Hello, Jill Grote, Johnny Five, Jordan Sloat, Jose Villalobos, Joshua DeProy, Cody Gibson, Creeper207, Paul at Drunk on Mako, Pratable, Rob McCann, Bobby Mac 265, Robert Sosa, Roberto Nieves, Roger Reichart, Russell Sayer, Smithy Poo, and Zek Three Swords Sama. Thank you all so much for continuing to listen to and support All Things Nintendo.